Have you ever wondered what it's like to own your own business? Be your own boss? Welcome to Season 7 of Business Mentorship, Keepin' It Real, where we meet with corporate leaders who have taken the leap to business owner and join us as part of the shareyourstoriesonline series. Hello, I'm Trish Tonak, and today we're going to meet a small business owner, celebrate their great idea, and introduce you to the person behind the logo. We invite you to sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. Hello and welcome to the show. Our guest joins us from Calgary, Alberta. Laura Ballerini is the founder of bluBrown Communications, a skillful, award-winning designer who draws on her extensive knowledge and experience to achieve superior results for every client and every project. She's an award-winning author who supports big thinkers grounded in the tiny details. And we are thrilled she's also joining us as the creative director for this year's annual Share Your Stories Digital Magazine. Laura's going to share her story on entrepreneurship and give us a behind-the-scenes look into the life of a small business owner. I'd like to welcome and introduce everyone to Laura.
Thank you, Trish. I'm very happy to be here today.
You know, I've been so looking forward to our conversation because when I read your story, I could see so many symmetries between, the things that took us from being in JOBs or in jobs in corporate and going into small business. So perhaps we'll start with and share with our viewing and listening audience, what was the tipping point that moved you from having this wonderful career in corporate and deciding that you wanted to start your own company?
Yeah, for me, it was an interesting time. I was in corporate for a long time. I worked in the newspaper industry in its heyday, which was fantastic. It was a great place to work in advertising. I was in the advertising department, and then I worked for a telecommunications company, and I loved it. But I had a daughter who was in school who was struggling with ADHD, and she needed more attention. She needed more, I guess, stability. I'm a hard worker. I always worked overtime, and that was tricky to juggle motherhood, I guess, with a full-time career. So I decided that I was going to start my own company. I thought I had done well in my corporate life, and I thought I can transition into being a business owner and juggle, having a child with ADHD and balance all that a little bit better. So that was really the tipping point for me.
So that was the motivation, really, was family, right?
It was family.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I think that
And
happens a lot of times, right?
yeah, well, the irony is once you own your own business, you work harder than you've
I
ever
was
worked in
just
your
going to
life.
say, I was just
So
going to say.
I've always been a hard worker and I've always worked overtime. And then when I started on my own, I have been working harder than I've ever worked. But it's fine because I got to, blend family life a little bit better with my daughter and her needs. So
Right.
yeah.
Now, your firm has obviously grown over the years because you do have a number of colleagues. It's you're not a solopreneur. You have folks that work with you as part of a team. What was it like when you decided to make that transition to hire your first employee or your first team member?
Yeah, so to be clear, I don't have employees. I have a virtual team. And
Right.
I'm very proud to say that we've been working together for I've been in business for 27 years. So probably about 25 years I've been working with these people. They're senior level, they're in different they offer different facets to what I do. So one's, a programmer, one's a marketer. So they offer things that help round what I bring to the world.
Right.
So we are a virtual team. I bring them in as the project's required, and that's a good thing because it keeps things lean. It keeps
Sure.
budgets reasonable for my clients, and it brings in top quality talent when needed. So it's a virtual team. They're not employees, but I'm very proud to say that we work very well together and we each build on each other's strengths.
That's what I love. That's what I wanted to share with our viewing and listening audience is that even though we're not physically in the same location, and you don't perhaps meet around the water cooler to have an opportunity to chat. And even though they're not sort of what we'll call paid team members, it's still a team, even though
Yes.
you're right, even though you're virtual. And I love the fact that you sought to include members that had skills that perhaps you felt weren't your strong suit, or perhaps you didn't have the time to devote to that particular area. And that's what I think is a really important factor for those who are in small businesses, because I think we tend to think that when we're a solopreneur, that's it. You know, we're on our own. We got to figure it out. And sometimes we do. But I love the fact that you've blended this amazing virtual team together, even though you're not in a physical space and they're not traditional employees.
Yes, it actually works out really well, and
Yeah,
we do feed off each other.
for
And
sure.
one of my big things is nurture your network. Like, they're great. We're all in Calgary, so it is convenient in that way that we can meet if
If you
required.
need to, yeah.
But very loyal. Like, we all support each other and really try to make each other better. And that's what I really, really appreciate and respect with the people that I work with. But I meet new people every day, and I try to expand my network every day because I think that's critical as well, right?
Right. Let's talk a little bit about that, because, being in business for 27 years as an entrepreneur is a feat in itself, because you and I both know that's not easy to do. Keeping a sustainable, successful business, as you say, does take a lot of hard work. It does take collaborative partners. And then the other piece is ensuring that you have a network that grows and thrives so that you can meet new folks. What do you find is the best way to make those connections in the virtual networking world? Because I don't think any of us are going very often to in-person networking events anymore, right? Most of us are doing it virtually.
Yes. I did belong to a business networking group. We met for breakfast every week. I belonged to that group for several years, and actually, it was this year that I decided that it was time to make a change. So
Right.
since then, I've been doing a lot of virtual networking, and a lot, to be honest, women in business. And I found there's kind of a niche there. There's a lot of us supporting each other, which, you know what, I really appreciate that, women supporting women. And I know that's kind of a cliche, but I have truly met really incredible women through these networking groups. And certainly the networking group, you're kind of chit-chatting and talking a very high level, but it's
Mhm.
those one-on-ones afterwards that
Right.
are really important to me, because that's where I really get to see what makes you tick and what makes you so special in what you do. And just, some of the stories I hear of people all over the world and their incredible stories is really amazing. So the networking itself is great, but it's those breakaway sessions where you're actually doing the one-on-ones that I really get some value out of that, a lot of value out of that. And that's where I find the magic is for me.
And I really appreciate the fact that you've mentioned that, sometimes we meet someone through personal referrals and introductions too, right? So
Yeah.
we cyber connect people because we've met someone that we're like, wow, that person would really make a connection with so and so, someone else that in our. I mean, I can certainly say that's how the Share Your Stories network has grown. We would never be where we are on 5 continents with over 500 business features shared if it wasn't for folks like you who open their Rolodex and say, you know what, you need to meet this person because I think there's an opportunity here for them to share their story.
Well, in fact, I think I met you through Laura DeFranco.
You
She had
did.
connected me with some great women, and you're one of them, and I really
Yeah.
appreciate that. So yeah, no,
And
it's
I think
amazing.
that's an important component, right? Because we forget. So, do you have a designated day? I mean, for me, it's Mondays. So, my calendar is really only open to the world at large for those one-to-one sessions on Mondays. And then, if I need to, I have another day in the week where if I'd like to continue the conversation in a different way or follow up with someone, I certainly make those connections and we continue the conversation. But is there a specific, because, we're still running businesses, right?
Yes,
There's
yes.
still lots to do, and we still are serving a client base. Even if this is a
Mhm.
passion project for me, I still look at everyone as a strategic partner, right? And I have goals and objectives and things that I'd like to achieve for every, individual that we feature. So
Right.
I still have deliverables as well, even though it may not be a revenue stream. So how do you manage the calendar or the schedule with the networking? Do you do it ad hoc or do you have one day in the week that you designate for marketing?
I actually do it ad hoc.
Oh, okay.
However, I do try to arrange my networking in the mornings. I feel like I'm fresher in the morning. I'm kind of on in the morning.
Yeah,
The afternoons is where I really like to dedicate my creative work because that's where I can just zone in. It's quieter, and that's where I can really focus. And by the way, even when I do creative work for me, I like to work on it and step away. So the breaks for me and my creative work, they actually work for me to my advantage because every time I go back to review, I'm going, oh, let's fix this, let's do that, let's move that. So for me, I don't do creative work in one sitting.
right.
I start and put it away, do something else, maybe do that networking call or do another project and go back to it. And then those fresh eyes, I'm changing things and moving and fixing and making it stronger and better. So I never do a project in one sitting. Of course, when you're doing websites, that's longer term anyway. But
Right.
even then, if I'm designing a homepage, I'm doing it in stages. So I'm
Right.
looking at it, coming back and reviewing.
Let's talk a little bit about that creative component because that's something that you and I share. I have the creativity and the art, and you have it. You have this wonderful catchphrase, that you make every pixel count. So share with our viewing and listening audience how that creativity works because we all need to nurture it, and you've given us a little bit behind the process where you take frequent breaks and then you look at it with fresh eyes. But where do you get the inspiration from? Because that's really all part of the creative process.
Yes, and it depends on the project. Like when I work with clients, I always come to the table with fresh eyes, with open eyes. And honestly, I do more listening than talking. So for me to be doing podcasts it's very new for me because I'm not really the talker, I'm the listener. And I do listen to client needs, what they're looking for, what problems we're trying to solve. And then I go away and come up with solutions. So for me, the inspiration is listening sometimes to what they're not saying and trying to really focus on those needs and not being an order taker but going away. They're hiring me for a creative um, overview, so I'm going away and really trying to come up with creative solutions to what they're looking for. And as far as the process again, I find that although I'm creative and I sit in front of a computer and yes, I make every pixel count, someone once told me, oh, you do lipstick. And I was quite insulted because a designer does not do lipstick. A designer, when I was talking to a writer the other day, I said, my job, I know content is king, but my job as a designer is to frame and wrap excellent content because I do love working with good content. It's critical. I
Right.
wrap good content with design, and I think it's really important to create a hierarchy of information, whether it's your homepage or a magazine or a mailer. It's like, how do I want the viewer to look at this content? And so
Right.
as you know, I like doing pull quotes. I like highlighting different things because much like a website, we don't read from top to bottom. We're scanning, we're looking for what's in it for me.
Sure. Yeah.
So it's very
True.
much with a magazine. I actually still look through magazines and flip through paper, but
Hmm.
there is a hierarchy to how you present the information. And that's something I'm really sensitive about. So whether it depends on the project, but it also depends on what is the client, what are their needs and how can
Right.
I solve those or fill those needs. So it's very much an is that the right word, in back and forth. I'll
Sure.
present, I'll work with the client, do a discovery session, go away, present a solution, present it to the client, and then there's a little bit of give and take, right? It's like this is my creative thought process, and maybe we're doing some tweaking back and forth, so it's
Mhm.
never I'm the
Static.
problem solver and that's it. It's no, it's
Right.
very much a collaborative project. But having listened in those discovery sessions solves a lot of problems through the design. And I'm always checking off my notes with my designs to make sure I've listened, I've captured it, and I want to make sure that visually I'm capturing it as well. So it's a process. It's not a one
Yeah.
stop.
And I love the fact that you've mentioned that you very rarely will do a project from start to finish in one sitting because the creative process, as you shared, changes and morphs. And every time you look at it, I mean, I know when I'm editing, when just we'll use the magazine as an example. Sometimes it's not till you see the rough draft in its entirety that you go, holy cow, how did I miss that?
Yes.
Or, you look at the rough draft in its entirety and you go, wow, this is really amazing. There's only a few tweaks here and there, that we need
Right.
to do, because I find the same thing in my artwork. You do the foundational elements, and then I usually go away and come back. And funnily enough, lots of times I put the work on the floor and look at it
Yeah,
top down, right? Because,
totally.
yeah, the viewer is going to see it completely different. So, in keeping with
Totally.
that kind of thought, in our digital marketing world, I mean, we've all heard stop the scroll. How do we stop the scroll? So, we're all trying to find that visual punch, the visual
Mhm.
connection, so that the viewer and or listener will stop scrolling and pay attention to the content that we're sharing. Is there some sort of strategy or a thought that you can leave with our viewing and listening audience if someone is thinking of making either a brand change or updating their brand or introducing a new element, that you often find that works for people to sort of say, okay, now's the time when I want to make that update?
That's kind of a loaded question, but I'll take it for the last point. For me, doing an update, I think, is when your maybe your company vision has changed or has been tweaked a little bit itself, or your target audience has been more
Yeah,
refined.
yeah,
Because, when I first started out, target audience doesn't really matter. Today, target audience is everything, and it's usually
for
right
sure.
down to the individual, right?
Mhm.
So we need to know, what are they wearing? What kind of jewelry do they like? How do they do their hair? What colors? Obviously, color is a big thing. But
Yeah,
for me, I find understanding and revising and updating my target audience has changed and shifted through 27 years, obviously. So I'm
right.
constantly trying to, update that and make sure I'm speaking to my audience. But
Mhm.
as far as stopping the scroll, again, my job as a designer is to grab attention so that they're going to read the content. I do really believe it's about content. And I know we're doing a lot more videos these days because people seem to they want to catch things quickly and,
Sure.
grasp things in a couple seconds. So it's very challenging as a designer, as a writer to do that. Having said that, I do find color. Color is amazing in capturing attention.
Right.
So, however, I'm going to go the opposite to that too. If you're looking, if you, and you have to go where your audience is. For example, if your audience is on Instagram, scroll through, see what's on there, and you might actually want to do the opposite. If we've got a lot of color, a lot of graphics, a lot of video, you might want to go quiet. Do a nice white background with a simple message. And that way, when people are scrolling, they may stop and go, oh, that's visually giving me a rest for my eyes. So you
Right.
kind of have to think about who your audience is, what medium you're in, what channel you're in, and how you can stand out against the visual competition, because it's not all advertising. Sometimes it's just post, but really breaking up that visual um, I guess, experience. So I
Right.
think it's sometimes doing the opposite. Obviously, I'm a big brand champion. I believe in using the brand colors and the fonts, and I think that is critical. But I do
Mhm.
think there's variations to that. I think we can add some fresh, inject some fresh perspective into our brands, particularly for different mediums. I'm working with a client right now. He wants to do a video of him and his work, his decades of incredible work, and I'm working on a storyboard. So again, that's a different mindset.
Oh,
So
for sure.
yeah,
Almost
so
like a
to
commercial, right?
you actually wants to do like a 90-second movie trailer type
Yeah.
concept. So
Yeah.
for me, I don't only do websites and print and magazines, and social, but now you're thinking in a different kind of medium where there's music and there's voiceover and there's action.
Right.
So you really have to be, I think, sensitive again to who do we want to attract with this type of medium.
Right.
So I actually find my job very, very satisfying and very exciting because I get to tap into all
All
all the
those.
visual cues,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, for sure. Now, speaking of that, what if you had to describe your ideal client? Because, we've talked a little bit about market segments and target markets and really becoming a niche, zoning in on a niche, especially if we're doing sort of the little tweaks to our brand. If you had to define or or explain who your ideal client would be, what type of business do you feel you're attracted to and is attracted to you?
Surprisingly enough, I've had great success in industrial manufacturing. So when someone told me you do lipstick, the irony is I really understand the industrial manufacturing. We've had great success in that. And I think it's because you're coming to the table with eyes wide open. You're asking the questions that maybe nobody's asking because you may not understand how this robotics works or whatever. But
Right.
however, I've also worked with some clients in the pharmaceutical industry, which is absolutely fascinating. And I think it is becoming because I'm coming to the table with eyes wide open. So I do not specialize in an industry. I've done that very much on purpose from day one.
Right.
At first, I thought, oh, maybe you can go into, whatever, um, the law industry or something like that. People that have budgets and marketing departments, that's going
Your
to make
focus.
sense. But I
Yeah.
did not want to do cookie cutter solutions. And I'm not saying that other designers that do that are cookie cutter, but for me, I worried about that. I wanted to actually have fresh solutions for different industries in different times. So the short answer really is my ideal client is someone who respects good design and is willing to pay for it.
So
Right. And
actually,
I'm
it's
not
more about the personal connection, right? With that
very
person.
much. It's, you know what? It's values. My
Yes.
values have to match the values of my clients. And early on, I fired a client, my first client that I had, because he was phoning me at 8 o'clock at night. He was very aggressive. He was very angry. And it was like, you know what? We don't align.
Right.
There's nothing about this that I can't help you. And I don't
Right.
know if he ever found anybody that could work with him. But there is a point where I have found that my clients and I have similar values, and that really is a driving force.
Yeah, and I love that. I love that because I think likes attract like, right?
Yeah.
And I think you also made a really good point. One of the reasons why you become an entrepreneur is so that you do have that option to say, I'm sorry, but I don't think I can help, or our goals don't align, or this is not, I'm not the right person for you, the right designer, the right artist, the right whatever, fill in the blank, right?
Yes,
But
yes.
that's one of the beauties of being self-employed is that you do have the opportunity to look at the bigger picture and make a personal decision as to whether or not, especially after the number of years that you and I have been in business. I mean, I always
Yes,
say, if I'm not having fun at this stage of the game, I'm not doing it,
exactly.
right?
Exactly. And don't get me wrong, I think probably like you, within a few seconds, really, I can judge a person if this is a good
Yep.
fit or not, if,
Yep.
if this is going to work. So the intuition is really high, and
Yeah.
it gets higher when you're working for yourself because there's nothing to fall back on. And to be honest, the first client that I fired was my first client, and I've never had that problem ever since. So I
Yeah.
learned I
Yeah.
learned my lesson really quickly as well.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's important, right? Now,
Mhm.
one of the things that we do in our guest blog is we talk about 3 words of advice. And I think that, when we've been in business for a significant amount of time, we do actually become role models and mentors, not only in our industry, but in our communities, because other people are looking at your sustained success and saying, you know what, Laura's been at this for a long time and she's obviously doing the right things, or you wouldn't have the longevity in order to achieve the success, right? So, with our viewing and listening audience, we ask folks to share 3 words of advice, and yours are be creatively fierce. So, why don't we wrap up our conversation today? You and I could spend hours and hours on this podcast because I think there's so many symmetries and so many wonderful pieces of information that we can share. But wrap up our conversation just today with talking about why is be creatively fierce important to you and what you do.
Yeah, thank you for that. For me, creativity is what I do for my work, but creativity is really every cell in my body. Everything I do is creative. I was born a creative. I am a creative through and through, and I do believe everyone is creative. My husband's a car guy. He's a creative guy when it comes to building an engine. But I wanted to leave it with, I work in front of a computer. I do count pixels and I make every pixel count, and that's important to me. But off work, I am doing creative things, whether it's painting or writing, like you, or recently took up quilting. I'm finding that those creative things that I do offline When I come back to the table in the morning, they've exercised my brain.
Yeah.
There's critical thinking involved. There's creativity that gets stronger and stronger. That makes me a better designer. So for me, I think whatever we do for work, let's have fun and have joy on the off hours because that creativity that we may not think is creative is sharpening our creative skill set and our critical thinking. And I think that's important to bring back to our work because we might not consciously know that. It took me a while to realize I'm exercising my brain in the evening with sewing or whatever. And that when I come to it's solving problems. And that's, I think, what a designer is. We solve problems. So for me, adapting creativity into everyday life, into every moment of every day that and do what brings you joy. Sports is a creative effort. If you're an athlete and you're, you know, throwing a ball on the ball diamond, that's creative. You're trying to figure out who's on first
Who's
base,
on first? Yeah.
So
For sure.
there's critical thinking in everything we do. And I think it's being cognizant of that, appreciating that we're all creative beings and taking that back to the boardroom or the computer in the morning, because I think that makes us better people all the way around.
You know what? You've given me a really great insight. I think that what we need to do is get together and have a panel discussion with some other folks who are also creative, because I think this whole idea of creativity and the fact that we are all creative. I saw a sign the other day that said, before you go to school, before you write, before you learn how to print, you're actually an artist because you're
Yes.
coloring and drawing. And so that's given me, would you, I'll ask you now, would you participate in a panel discussion just to talk about creativity and how we nurture that?
Yes, I would love that. And just as an aside, artistry and creativity is not woohoo. It's a very
Right.
important skill set to bring if you're an accountant, if you're a lawyer, if you're a
Absolutely.
police officer. So creativity is not the woohoo, painting
Yeah.
and making abstract art. So I just want to preface that because I think a lot of people misunderstand what creativity is.
You're absolutely right. And I also think that it's part of being human. It's how we express emotion as well. So, well, we'll do that. I'll make sure that we get a panel discussion to talk about creativity. So, Laura, I'd like to thank you for joining me today and giving us some insight not only into your creative business journey, but into just how we can be better humans and reconnect with ourselves and how we do that in our community. So, thank you so much.
Thank you, Trish. It's been great. Love the discussion.
To our viewing and listening audience, I'd like to thank you for tuning in to this edition of Keeping It Real. And I'd like to send my personal thanks to all of our sponsors and mentors for their ongoing support. And stay tuned, because when we launch that new magazine on July 1st, you're going to have a chance to see the creativity that Laura and I have shared in our new digital magazine. So stay tuned for that. And we also ask that you share and invite your friends and colleagues to subscribe to our show, Business Mentorship, Keeping It Real, found on YouTube and your favorite podcast channel. Laura and I would like to thank you for joining us, and we look forward to meeting you next time when we meet another business owner and celebrate their great idea.